has been reported that in the medium term, in the short term, Nigerians will remain embattled with higher petrol and food prices due to the recent reforms. As of June 2023, inflation was 22.8%, aggressively eroding a consumer disposable income, which grew by a tiny average of 0.1% between 2018 and 2022, compared to a 6% growth from 2011 to 2015. Now, when we talk about inflation, where it's when the cost of living in general increases over time. That's what inflation is about. When money, more money is injected into the balloon, that is the balloon of the economy, it expands and the price level rises. A rise in the money supply or the amount of money in circulation is one of the primary causes of inflation. So how do we get out of this doldrum and make life a little better for Nigerians? We have two gentlemen joining us this morning for this conversation. Olugbenga Adeoye is a chartered accountant, founder and principal.
And very quickly took over the rights of the sovereign, whose best interest is to make sure that his people do very well and there is prosperity. So now, having said that, before we put that into perspective, you need to know where are the missteps you have taken that has taken out the district, which is a stone that we have on our necks that needs to be rolled over. The first stone was put there when we did Dodger Award, an award that was done without relation to productivity at all. And that meant that you sowed the seed of inflation, which you haven't come out of. The second one, we said that you wanted to indigenize. And indigenize, you having the management skills, nor the capacity to run those companies, which is just, it's not a corner shop. So again, that's another stone that rolled on top of us. The third stone was that you began to deregulate in the sense of closing down markets, commodity markets and stuff like that. So the linkages between the cities and the countryside has totally disappeared. And the final straw, which we started fighting in 1980, was they decided that this money in circulation should be taken care of by selling the dollar. So basically, you didn't have a foreign exchange market. Now, the president has said, I asked for this job, so I'm going to try and sort it out myself. But he needs to be certain that he's not taken captive, just like 256 economists took Margaret Thatcher captive. And I think, if you ask me, not 100 days yet, I think they've done fairly well. They've taken the bold moves, and after taking those bold moves, they have to make sure the adjustments are right. And then, like you said earlier, because all of these big stones are on us, and they need to be rolled off, the administrative structures have stopped to function. And the levers of control of the economy, whether in the central bank, in the Ministry of Finance, or elsewhere, no longer have a response when you pull them. Those are the key issues. And if we can ask a broad, calling a broad position, ask for a lot of position papers before the decisions are made, so you don't rush into play. But if you ask me, I think the correct table stay the course while you're still trying to fix the kitchen and put the food on the table is commendable. That's where I can say for now. I'll wait for 100 days to say in clear terms whether there's a definite direction for the economy or not.
Well, you began by talking about the difficulty the chef is having in the kitchen. That's right. And there is no doubt that the chef has already quite found out that, look, even though I made the promise and I shouldn't pity me, I know that it's a very, very turbulent kitchen. I know that there are scarce resources in the kitchen. And I know that the hungry populace is waiting for whatever it is. They are already hungry. But you began by talking about also the fact that while Mr. Adeoye was talking about the consumer side and all of that, you were looking at the man on the street. Mr. Adeoye also spoke about the difficulty of communicating these difficult decisions to the populace. I want you to espouse as much as you can on how well that has been done in the past less than 100 days in office of this government. How well would you say people agree with the policies? I'm talking about the man on the street. How tolerant they can be, given that almost every government that comes into office is asking them to be patient, to be tolerant, and now this is what we have now.
Well, I think the fact that the president comes out all the time, even if he's doing it well or not doing well, telling you where he's going, whether you agree or don't agree at all, that's a very good beginning. Now, if you look at the State of the Nation address by the American president, there are structures to it. And it looks at all the demographics of society, looks at the aged, it looks at those who are in the working class, whether they're skilled enough, and they release what they call the unemployment figures, and then the capacity to train the younger ones to take over from those who are already working. That is how the schools work, how the community colleges are working and stuff like that. So once that structure sets in, and I think the president will make sure that sets in over time, and then he begins to say, over all of these things, how do we then work to ensure that the infrastructure or the tools of production are in place? All of this picture will become clearer. Also, I think to a large extent, there's always a linkage because money is not on its own. Money links both to production and your tax rate. Once all of these begin to get clearer, then maybe we can begin to work rather quickly. Now, we must also admit that despite all this pain, a time was there when we had prosperity to share. When companies from as far away as Congo came to buy textiles in Nigeria, when we were able to support the what do you call them again, we're frontline states to South Africa. Now, all those points I told you earlier on, all those points of misstep, destroy that capacity to either build prosperity at home or share it abroad as a power of influence rather than bullets. So those are the key issues. And I think that, like I told you, like Margaret Thatcher found out, campaigning itself is a small part. Working through with the system of a strong and powerful bureaucracy set in its ways that is just the beginning of the issue.
Well,
thank you.
Well, I'm hoping that just as you said, the Nigerian will be able to understand that. Mr. Adeye, let me come back to you now. A number of issues have been raised and all of that. You highlighted the fact that we talked about quick recovery. Just yesterday, less than 24 hours now, the president was also at a meeting and saying, look, we have to get this economy out of the doldrums for the benefit of the greater number of Nigerians. So that fact is not lost on the president. How quickly do you think that can be? And what do you think a government should be giving to the people? What do you think the people should be getting from government in terms of communication to ensure that they are able to buy into it? Otherwise, I don't know where we'll find ourselves. So how quickly do you think this can happen? And what should Nigerians expect so that they are not expecting too much too soon and then be disappointed?
I think within the next 90 days, if the government is able to roll out what I call food crop policies, so that the cash crop policies can be protected. Like I said earlier, I also said that the problem is not with the policies, because once this policy reaches their gestation period, we're going to reap the reward. But the problem is that we must survive during this period. And so one major decision the government needs to take is to manage the capitalists who are speculative in creating crisis in the economy. Just like my colleague said there, you realize that as a government, you may be held captive by the people that are affected by the policy you're bringing out. So, quick one. For example, essential raw materials that are brought into the country, Nigerian Customs Service came up with a valuation method that they are going to value it at a new rate, 770 naira to $1. I think this is going to impact negatively in the manufacturing sector. Remember that they source foreign exchange at a high rate to get the materials into the country. At first, they pay interest to get the loans from whichever bank they get it. And so when they bring it and they are now to pay duty, it's important for us to more or less, in my own view, to maintain the status quo ante such that people can breed, just like Mr. President said. So that is one way. the poor masses, they are not interested in all the economic jargons we speak. They are not interested in the inflation figure you're talking about. They are asking, how much can I get a bread in the market? How much can I get noodles? I happen to be the chairman of a company. One line of product is bread. And the managing director called me 2 days ago and said, there is crisis. How are we going to fix prices for our bread and other products? Because flour was moving from 20-something thousand to 30,000 to 32 to 34 to 35 and now 38. And to get a trailer load of flour, you need about 22-point-something million. So the staple food you see with the poor masses is bread and beans, rice, and then these things are no longer affordable. So what else can you give to the people? They have problem with energy because there is no power supply around the country adequately. So
but
they need to buy
you also agree, Mr.
Adeoye, no matter what the price is, people must buy.
Pardon me for butting. You also agree, like many, economists, have discussed it, that look, there are difficult decisions that need to be taken, and unless those difficult decisions are taken, there is no hope anywhere. So that's why I'm asking, for how long do you think people should be patient, and what kind of communication should government be pushing out in order to buy their confidence?
As a matter of fact, when you have crisis like this, government needs to be flexible in all the policies. So you've got to do regular meeting with stakeholders and say, what are the major problem with our people? What can we adjust? We are not saying, oh, return subsidy. No. But we're saying, look, what best can we do? Can we quickly get buses for all the states, all the senatorial districts? If we cannot get all at the same time, can we have 50 buses quickly? What is the delivery time? And you communicate to the citizen that, look, you don't have to drive around.
So it goes back to what you said the other time.
Number of vehicles will arrive.
It goes back to what you said earlier about the intervention that government has already announced. How soon it gets to the people, perhaps that's the challenge here. Mr. Yore, Mr. Adeoye just spoke about communication with critical stakeholders. One of the critical stakeholders are the governors. 50% of them, plus or minus, are new, first-time governors in office. 50% of them are, of course, returning and also. Do you think the collaboration between federal and state governments have begun? Because perhaps some will be wondering, if that collaboration has begun, how come we're not hearing of it? And if it has begun and we are not hearing of it, does that mean that the palliatives or whatever initiatives of governments to make life, at least ease life a little for the people, does that mean that we still have to wait a little longer? How do you think that engagement with governors at the state level need to go? We've only had, I think, to the best of my knowledge, maybe just one NEC meeting so far.
Most people have done things. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Go ahead.
For a long, long time, most people are used to doing things in a dark way. And so when a new light shines into play, the sheer lights of it frightens them and they go back into the darkness. So you need to be able to sustain what you're doing now. But the fact to come to play that judicious use of resources is critical. Now, on the quick right, what I say basically that there are more multilateral agencies than IMF and the World Bank. We belong to a lot of few trade groups. And we can use a lot of the influence in multilateral groups to bring in products and prices and ensure that our goods go out in good time to help international trade. Also, when you talk about privatization, it's actually a pivoting between what the Treasury gives and what the capital market supplies. If you do not pivot properly between what you think is a burden of the Treasury and what can go into commercial private sector activities through the capital market, the burden of the government is going to remain very high and push it all down. I see the way we're trying to acquire buses, electric buses, for example, as maybe not taking advantage of what can happen through capital markets. And then, of course, what is essential is that we realize that the issue of managing currency is a very specialist thing. You need a well-twisted and informed treasurer to manage the crisis that we have with the currency that is depreciating. And we've been saying this one since 1988. It's not just for anyone to come and say, you read that, you read that. This is actually the skills of a champion sportsman. We need to find out who these strong currency managers are that can get it out of the woods. Because once you sort the currency problem, many other things will fall into play. That's my take, but again, I'm not on the advisory board. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Yore, it sounds to me like something that will gladden the hearts of small businesses, MSMEs generally. And I'll take you both on this, but taking you first, Mr. Yore. So far, policies of government, how is it, in your opinion, faring on government? Please take it in the light of the announcement that the federal government made, both when declaring the emergency on food security and that's, speech that presidential broadcast, the last presidential broadcast, where a number of initiatives were announced.
Well, just like my colleague already said, it is essential that you realize that if more than 60% of the food produced in this country, including some that comes naturally, goes to waste. So the process for getting that food into production is critical. And that has to be done almost immediately for you to make sure that the countryside begins to live again. And then you also realize that most of these shopping malls you see in America and the rest of the world, like Walmart and the rest of them, all of that food you see there is actually through the cooperatives that send them in, and they don't get paid until the end of the cycle, just like McDonald's does that. But like I've told you, these really are things I think that those who are in the coterie of advisors are most really looking at. All I will say is that just like the Jews did and Italians did, they should see how well they can bring in some of those who are outside, not to be in the office as commissioners or ministers, to send in position papers, perspectives of what needs to be done to get out of this quickly. I think you just continue to mix up the ideas. Because if you say you did this way, we really haven't had an economy since 1960, because the situation where more than 70% or 80% of us don't get a take-home pay that takes them home, it's not an economy. So the burden is not light. But I think it's essential to have a structured way so that not everybody comes in to make all the noise and then just see and be seen, and then at the end of the day, nothing gets done. We must walk our talk.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Adeoye, same issue. I mean, also glad to know that you chair the board of a small business. Do you think those initiatives that government announced are significant in any way at all to instill some confidence in the micro, small, and medium enterprises sector?
Well, it's difficult to say whether this is enough, adequate, or inadequate. There is something that the government needs to do that will cut across all entrepreneurs, small and medium-scale enterprises across the country. I spoke about the need for single-digit credit that was announced by the government. Apart from finding a way to provide credit facilities for existing businesses, we also must see how we can fund new ideas so that we can reduce the exodus of our people from the country. Because capacity building is not something that is easy to do. People have gone to polytechnics, colleges of education, universities, and then they are moving in masses out of the country because they don't have jobs. This is an emergency that we also need to address and call young people from age 25 to 35. Come up with ideas. At every state level, the governors need to get involved, all the regions. No region will be left behind. You look at the comparative advantage. You say, if you are from the Northwest, what can you do about leather production, meat production, ranching? You go to the Southeast, you begin to ask them questions about manufacturing, technology, shoemaking, shirt making. You come to the Southwest, and you begin to talk about skill, IT skill of our people, and say, how do we fund these people? And you go around the state and say, every state we're taking 100 young men that will create employment. And so people will see seriousness in government and sense of belonging. Government must not make vague statements that we're going to do X, Y, Z. You have to put timeline, mention the people that are implementing, the agencies that are doing it, and telling us specific date. And if they don't perform, you fire them.
Okay.
So these are issues.
Okay. Well,
if you look at the rate at which we
you made some salient points just now. Forgive me for butting in. You made some salient points, and now I'd like you to address this within the next 1 minute. How do we begin to build trust all over again? Because no matter how fantastic the policies of government are, if the people do not trust it, they will not be able to follow, going by what you described just now. Oh, government said 100 of us should come. They will just take it with a pinch of salt. We heard this before. So how do we build that trust? If you can do this in 60 seconds or less.
Actually, to be trusted, you have to carry the people that are affected along. That's the only way to be trusted. As a family man, you call your wife and children, these are the plans, what do you think about this? If we do this, what will be the result? And then they bring their input, and then we set agenda and we implement. But if you just sit down somewhere and you say, this is what we're doing, without carrying the stakeholders along, you cannot be trusted.
Okay. Mr. Ayore, same question to you, particularly young people. How do we ensure that we carry the young people along in a way that they can trust government all over again? Because we know that that's been depreciated over the years.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Makinde. I told you earlier on how all the production linkages were broken. Dodgy, I gave you the whole line of it. Now, basically, MSME is not just a big bang idea, Apple computer or whatever, or art and craft, design and all that. MSMEs actually are you embedding the activities of the users into the industrial value chain. For example, I used to run a foundry for Guinness, Coca-Cola, Nigerian breweries, and Cadbury's, and that's very many years ago. And then because I couldn't get the spare parts, I then shifted into financial services. There are still very many things that can be produced. You see, when you talk about the American system, for example, there is a production line. Even if you're going to make a bed, the one who's going to produce the top and the one who's going to produce the bottom. And because they're producing all those small units and in large numbers, the efficiency of production and the value of what is produced makes them competitive. Now, on their own, they cannot do that. But if the government creates a framework for that to happen, then it becomes easier for you to take all of that in. You try to achieve some of that through the kind of education you offer, but the system in itself must see that the embedding of small production into the value chain is what MSME must rest on, not just big bang ideas or arts and crafts. Thank you.
Quite a lot to take in, gentlemen. And I want to, it's a quick recovery conversation, and it's been done so quickly. Charles, you're a chairman of Dion and Associates. Thank you so much for joining us. Joined us all the way from Kent in the UK, as well as Olugbenga Adeoye. He's a chartered accountant, founder and principal partner at Gbenga Adeoye & Co. Thank you so much for being here, for offering us this counsel.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.
Okay.
Thank you very much. A pleasure.
Yeah. So when we return, green skills for the youth. How? Do stay with us.